Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I got another quick tip video and we're going to be talking about electronic throttle bodies, and I'm going to share a few tips and pointers to make yours last a little bit longer, because not doing a few things can cause these things to go bad over time, and you definitely don't want one failing prematurely because they cost quite a bit of money still. Now before we go ahead and begin, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button down below. Definitely smash the like button because it helps the channel out. With that said, let's go ahead and get started on today's topic. So lately in my shop, the last couple years, I've noticed a trend of these electronic throttle bodies failing quite easily, and they can be quite fragile. Now, most of these do pretty good. A lot of factors will determine on if you have a failure-prone throttle body, more like placement in the vehicle, if it's high, low, in the front of the car, back of the car. There could be a lot of various things. Now, this specific one, I believe, came out of a Dodge Journey with a 2.4 liter. For anyone that's worked on those cars, they'll know that this throttle body is located in the front lower half of the car, where the radiator fans are and everything. Now these always have a failure point, and the common failure that I always find on these Dodge Journeys or Dodge 2.4 liters is that the gears inside basically break off the gear brittle and they snap off. Now me personally, I think it has to do with the placement of where the intake is. This thing will live right in front of the radiator and all the hot air is always blowing on it, and it doesn't help that it's all plastic gears in here. So I think over time all that heat builds up, causes them to go bad. So something that you cannot control is the placement of it, but I have found that when these things live in hotter conditions or hotter areas in the engine, they can be problematic. Now a lot of people may be saying, Mike, well, you have no control over that, and how can heat kill a part that's made to undergo heat? Here's the thing: if this was in front of a radiator, it can fail more prematurely than, let's say, a design that has the throttle body on top of the engine, where, let's say, it gets more fresher air. Now they can handle heat, but they're not meant to take on, let's say, 350 degrees worth of heat. So it's a difference when you're dealing with, let's say, 150 degrees at the top of the engine versus 300 degrees in front of the radiator, or wherever it may be hotter. So that's why sometimes just the design element alone can cause these to go bad, which is the case with, at least with Dodge Journeys. Now this one failed because the gears inside basically probably got brittle and stripped away. Now I haven't opened it up or anything, mainly because it's always a common theme. I've opened it up before, it is what it is. But this thing had a correlation code, meaning the two sensors in here could not basically logically formulate the same exact number. One was off and the other was off, and they were saying incorrect correlation, which basically tells you internally here it had a failure. Plus it didn't really help the fact that when you would turn the ignition on, and this does the self-test, that this thing sounded like you were breaking walnuts with a hammer inside here. I mean, it was just a horrible sound. So as soon as I hear it, I know what it sounds like and I know what it is, and I just usually know what the repair is. It's quite simple at that point, but that's why this one failed. So what also happens on these, if you have to say your vehicle is not one of those that has a really bad design flaw on where they place this, and by that I mean they don't put it in the way of heat. Let's say your throttle body just is up top on a standard vehicle like a V6, gets not a lot of heat, and it's in a happy environment. What typically will cause these to go bad is the fact that if you look at the throttle body, now I'm going to show the back side, see all that dirt and crud that builds up over time, and it can also build up in the front. I don't know if you guys will pick up on that. Now throttle bodies are designed to basically leak air inside the engine. Think of it as a valve that opens and closes. In order for your car to idle, you have to have it at a certain opening to allow minimal air in so the engine can run its fuel maps. And what happens as this gets dirty over time, that little opening starts getting smaller and smaller, and the computer has to keep compensating by opening the throttle body more and more and more. Now let's say typically your throttle body, if it was let's say a circle, was always open at, let's say, 1 or 2 degrees of opening for it to idle when the throttle body was clean and brand new. Over time, accounting for dirt and a little bit of gear slop and things like that, there's a lot of things that wear on these, the computer will compensate and take that 1 or 2 degrees and turn it into 5, 10, whatever it needs. It'll slowly keep it opening more and more and more to compensate as that closure happens from dirt and debris. Now your computer can only do this for X amount of time or X amount of periods. Now, when I say that, it's not a short period. You can probably do that for years and years, but if your computer is constantly compensating for a dirty throttle body, I find that could put a lot of strain on usually the plastic gears that come in these things, and also on the motors, and it can cause it to wear prematurely. So it's one thing that I always find winds up going bad about these is the fact that no one really maintains them. Now, dealerships still always push like fuel injection cleanings and things like that. And I still do think that this is a part of it. Now, most modern cars, they've eliminated a lot of things. Throttle bodies have always been, a dirty item. They don't really get any fuel spray or anything like that. So dirt always winds up building up on these. So it's always been a thing to pull these off, clean them up, or leave them on the car and open the blade and get in there with a toothbrush or some sort of rag and brake cleaner and try to break down the carbon deposits and build up to get your car to breathe happier and, not have so much load on the throttle. Back in the day, they had adjusting screws where you would clean them up, back off the screws, and readjust them or adjust them more as you needed. There's always been these sort of things, and what I find is happening is that people are kind of disregarding these. Even dealerships, they're focusing more on cleaning your valves with walnut blasting or a bunch of chemicals, and they're kind of skipping the throttle bodies. I've had customers that take my word on stuff. Now, depending on where you go, some mechanics, will say you shouldn't have to clean this, or some will say you should clean it every, let's say, 15, 20, 30,000 miles. Depending on, who you go to, there's always a difference of opinion. Now, on these, I like to tell my customers that if they're easy to get to and they're accessible and doesn't require a whole ton of work, if, let's say you're replacing your air filter every 10,000 or 15,000 miles, if you can afford to do so and it's easy access, buy a new gasket for it, open it up, clean it. All it's going to cost you is a gasket, some time, and some brake cleaner and rags, toothbrush, whatever it is that you're using to clean it. It's pretty cheap maintenance, realistically. And if you keep up with that, it should, always be running good and smooth, and you'll actually prolong the life of this because it's not constantly having to adjust to different idle situations. Even though they still always have some fluctuations, it's not going to be like a permanent set where the computer says, hey, you got to start at 10 degrees and we're going to keep fluctuating back and forth between 15 and, 10 or whatever the case might be. And again, I'm using rough numbers, so if you're really technical, please don't get technical. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I'm not saying that throttle bodies stay open at 15 degrees, because if they do, I would assume your engine's probably at 3,000 or 2,500 RPM or something like that. If you got a 15-degree opening, I'm sure your engine would be revving up pretty high, or more than just idle. But just using numbers for the sake of giving people an idea of what I'm talking about. So that's the thing. It's if you clean it up and you're able to get to it, it's pretty quick, cheap, and easy maintenance, because even the dealerships now, they're kind of forgetting about these, because when you're doing like a almond blasting on intake valves, normally the whole intake comes off, and this normally is bolted onto the intake, so it's kind of a forgotten thing nowadays. Now, I'm not saying all of them do that. Some might go in there and clean it, but for the most part, I worked at a dealer. We were doing a lot of walnut blasting. Now it's dry ice blasting to get the valves cleaned up on the intake, since everything has gone, gas direct injection instead of a injector spraying on your intake valve. And I'll tell you this, a lot of the techs, even those a part of the service, would never clean these, or they forget about them, and then we get a bunch of premature failures. So, just one of those things. So I don't want to make this video too long, so I just pretty much want to cut it down to that. And just let everyone know that if you have an electronic throttle body, take the opportunity to clean these up every once in a while. Trust me, it's worth it, because these things are still, a few $100s. This particular one from Chrysler, I believe it was, and I don't know if this one is a Chrysler one or a GM one, because I've done quite a few of these this past month. But I want to say this was a Chrysler one that I did. Now, I could be wrong. This could have been a GM, because I just took the parts and threw them in the bin, and I don't know which one I grabbed right now. Memory doesn't serve me very well, because it's been like a month since I did this job. And I just threw one of these to the side, or both of them, as a possible opening up video, or, this video that I'm making for you. So I don't know if this is the Chrysler one or the GM one. Just putting that out there. If you're fact checking me and say that's not a Chrysler, it's a GM, this and that, I have both. One's in the corner of my shop. I just grabbed whichever one was on top. So clean your throttle bodies, make them happy. That way they run more effectively and saves you a couple $100 and a trip to the mechanic. So like always, comment, like, and subscribe, because it definitely helps the channel grow. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next video.